Okay, well, after Israel's recent campaign across multiple Middle East countries, Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, they finally have met some resistance and have just suffered the first act of retaliation against them in response to all this bombing that they've been doing outside of Israel recently. And the first party to strike back against Israel is, unsurprisingly, Hezbollah of Lebanon. That, of course, is the group that is closest to Israel of all the people that they bombed. Yes, Israel did bomb Iraqi Shiites. They bombed the Syrians. They bombed the Palestinians in Lebanon. And they also bombed Hezbollah. Now, you might say it would make more sense for the Palestinians to act first, but the Palestinians are not a monolith. This was some Palestinian splinter group, I believe, that the Israelis bombed, and this was a group which doesn't have the greatest operational capabilities, especially when compared to Hezbollah. So, for that reason, it is unsurprising that Hezbollah was the first to strike back, and probably will be the only one, at least in this recent bout of conflict between Israel and the rest of, well, I guess the Shiites in the Middle East. You may recall that Netanyahu's been talking real tough against all these folks, saying that all these folks they were plotting to attack Israel, and that he was getting ahead of the curve, and he was taking them out before they tried to take on Israel, and that all of them should be on watch, because any of them try and hit Israel, they're going to be in for a world of hurt. And so Hezbollah was taking a chance today when they decided to fire a couple of missiles at an Israeli armored personnel carrier, an act which Hezbollah claims led to the deaths of 2 to 4 IDF soldiers, but which Israel claims took no lives. Israel says that Hezbollah's attack on Israel was futile, and the Israelis responded to this futile attack in their eyes by launching about 100 shells across the southern border of Lebanon into Lebanon, which in an area that's pretty much controlled by Hezbollah. Southern Lebanon has a very strong Hezbollah presence, and that's why they are Israel's chief enemy in Lebanon, because there's a lot of sects in Lebanon, and the folks in the south who are closest to Israel are, of course, going to be Israel's biggest problem. Now, I'm unsure what sort of casualties the Israeli shelling could have led to. Of course, Hezbollah is claiming likewise that there were no casualties suffered on their side, and they say essentially that the Israelis just bombed an open field to save face and say, okay, look, we retaliated against Hezbollah for what they did, but Hezbollah is trying to spin the Israeli response really as one of weakness, and showing that Israel is trying to back down, that they don't want a conflict with Hezbollah. Because if you remember, as recently as last week, Netanyahu said that the entire Lebanese state would be held accountable for the actions of Hezbollah. And so one would think that, based on what Netanyahu said, that if Lebanon, say, launched an attack inside Israel and attacked some Israeli soldiers within Israel's borders, that would lead to a response by the IDF against the whole of Lebanon. And that's not what we've seen today. So far, Netanyahu has not shown any indication that he's going to declare war on Lebanon over this, or even that he's going to, bomb the Lebanese government itself, even though he was trying to make it clear that as a matter of deterrence, he wants to equate the Lebanese government with Hezbollah to show that if Hezbollah strikes Israel or makes them bleed, well, then, Netanyahu's going to make them all bleed. He's going to hold them collectively responsible. And this was supposed to incentivize the Lebanese government to rein in Hezbollah and stop them from retaliating against Israel for what they had done, which is not something that it seemed like the Lebanese government was going to do, and it certainly is something that they have not done. But for whatever reason today, now that Hezbollah has struck back, all that Israeli belligerence seems to have died down. They're not as interested in getting in a full-scale war with Lebanon or even Hezbollah itself. They seem to have backed down to some extent. I mean, obviously, they're still responding in some way. They're not completely cowering in fear because they did launch an attack in response, at least, so they're not that afraid of escalating things with Hezbollah, but they're not claiming essentially that the Hezbollah escalation was successful. In other words, if Israel really wanted to escalate things further with Hezbollah, if they really were feeling as aggressive as Netanyahu seemed last week, you would think that even if there weren't any IDF soldiers that were killed in reality, that Netanyahu and the IDF and the Israeli government would want to play up this event as some real terrible thing that Hezbollah had done, and maybe even lie and say that, well, someone might die or something, or somebody's in critical condition. They're not doing it. They're essentially saying that, yeah, Hezbollah bombed, shot a missile at us, no big deal. And so Hezbollah sees this as a victory for themselves because they essentially feel that they got the Israelis to back down. And I don't know if that's the case necessarily, but I'm just happy to see that it looks like that they're, at least at this moment, it will not lead to any further escalation. It seems like the Israelis are trying to de-escalate the situation, which is something I'd like to see. We don't need any more Middle East wars started by the U.S., Israel, or anybody else for that matter. And so perhaps today may be the last we hear of the recent flare-up in tensions in the Middle East between Israel and its neighbors. And if that does not end up being the case, I, of course, will follow up on this matter. If you gain anything of value out of this video, though, please do consider giving the video a like and sharing it. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.